We're going to see that each generation takes its values and expresses them in 3 dimensions. We're going to decode these old buildings, and they're going to tell us what was going on. I find architects are like engineers. I happen to have a mechanical engineering degree that I'm not using anymore, but I'm still a nerd for life. So we're going to nerd out a little bit. Let's see here. Any nerds on board? Come on, be proud. Own that. Okay, we got some. We're going to convert the rest of it, so don't worry about it. So anyway, most of you have a boatload of fun. Just be respectful of each other. And here we go. Let's talk about this white building in front of us. This is the iconic, personal favorite Wrigley building, early 1920s. Spanish Revival is the name of that style. Modeled after a cathedral in Seville, Spain, covered with these 250,000 glazed terracotta tiles, sort of like a porcelain, but softer. Now, our question on this Smart Tour quest is why? So why were they building buildings that look like European cathedrals and palaces here in Chicago in the early 1920s? Well, the answer is because the young United States didn't yet know what our own style of beauty was. We were still...
I don't know you! She loves you anyway! I love you!
So the young United States was still copying and pasting beauty from Europe. It wasn't until later we came into our own and found our own. This building in front of us, has its name on a spectacular Trump International Hotel and Tower. Second tallest building in Chicago. It's a high-end residence and hotel, and it is a pretty good example of one of the architectural styles that we're going to talk quite a bit about today, called contextualism. You look up there with me. See these 3 patio terraces? They're called setbacks. They're not arbitrary heights, because they're each at the height of a neighboring building. The first patio, where the Trump sign is, the same height of the roof of the right Wrigley building we just talked about. Second patio on the left, look across the river. Same height of that white rocket ship-shaped building. And the third patio up on the right, same height of the black box building on the other side. So what I'm saying is, it's acknowledging its 3 neighbors' heights. Site-specific designs intentionally meant to flatter the context. Contextualism. Now, the architect of Trump Tower is one of Chicago's most famous and beloved architects. Is a guy named Adrian Smith. Now, we call him the world's tallest architect. It's not because of his 5'7" stature, it's because he makes the tallest buildings in the world, including if you're here for real estate, you just missed it. The penthouse on the Trump Tower just sold a few months ago. 14,000 square foot, 5-bedroom for a cool $20 million. Nice little starter home for somebody. My wife and I got outbid by $20 million. All right, eyes up, cameras up, guys. As we come under the bridge, over to the right, you're going to see the twin, iconic corncob towers of Marina City. Now, these are pie-shaped apartments, each with their loaded balconies. I got a buddy who lives up there. A little difficult to furnish the pie-shaped living room. Now, here's its story. In the early 1960s, practically nobody was living in the city center business district of downtown Chicago. And there was a Chicago architect named Bertrand Goldberg. Now, he was kind of the social scientist of his generation. He wanted people to live in the city center like they did in Europe, where he studied. But there was no infrastructure for residential living down here, so he had to build this self-sufficient, autonomous city within a city where you can live above your luxury yacht, live above your valet parked car, live above your own restaurants, grocery store, movie theater, office space, dry cleaner, bowling alley, ice skating rink. Truly a city within a city. This is an introvert's dream world. You can live, work, and play. Over to the left is our Riverwalk. Now, this Riverwalk's just a few years old, has been a game changer for Chicago's relationship to this river, bringing citizens down to the river as never before. In fact, you get citizens this close to the water, they get a lot more concerned about the water quality in the ecosystem, so it's good for the river as well. Over to the left, can you see the bottom of this white granite building with the mirrored glass? As it comes into view, follow it all the way up to the top, and you'll see what looks like a Greek temple. The name of the style, neoclassic. You take something classic like the Parthenon, remake it with new materials, clarifying key proportions, the classic 30-degree pitch of the roof. This particular building, designed by the late Ricardo Bofill from Catalan, Spain, one of the few international architects represented on the river. For those of you that are visiting from out of town, which is the majority of you, you may find this helpful. The part of town to your left is called the Loop. You may have heard that term. Let me explain it. Our subway system, the trains are called the L because many of them are elevated. They literally make a loop in the core business district downtown. So the city center is called the Loop. You know, Chicago, look at all the folks on the river. Chicago is located here because of this river. In the mid-1800s, this little Chicago River was the waterway that connected the East Coast to the Mississippi River. That's back when things were shipped by barges and schooners. So lots of merchandise came through Chicago, and it's been a hub of commerce ever since. Planes, trains, semi-trailers coming through Chicago. And it's a city that respects its architectural heritage. Here's a couple examples. Look to the left. Because the left part of this building, built in 1927, and in addition, 16 years later, 1987. Notice how they use modern material and styling to complement the old instead of ignoring it. Here's another example. Look at the Wells Street Bridge in front of us. Look carefully at the lamps and handrails. This bridge is charming and vintage and old school and antique, except it's only 9 years old. It's an exact replica of the rusted 91-year-old bridge that it replaced. Brought in on barges over a long weekend, jacked up, bolted on, good for 91 more years. So if the Wrigley building, that very first building in style we saw, was looking to a handcrafted European-style cathedral past, our second architectural style over the right, Art Deco, is pointing to a machine-made American future. Here's what you'll see in an Art Deco building like the Merchandise Mart. You'll see deep inset windows make these soaring vertical racing stripes that draws your eye up. Stair-step setback, polished Indiana limestone, precision repetitive patterns, and decorative metal on the outside of the building. These buildings were made for a different generation. This is the late 1920s. That's the roaring 20s, the Jazz Age, a time of prosperity, luxury, airplane travel, sophistication. They wanted an architecture that expressed that optimism, and Art Deco was just that. Because each generation takes its values and expresses them in 3 dimensions. All right, guys, eyes up, cameras up. As we come under this bridge, we're coming into what's called Wolf Point. And you're going to see 360 degrees of amazing. This is kind of the trophy case of Chicago architecture. Beautiful day to see it. You got the Salesforce building still under construction, but everything else you see around here is new within the last 5 or 6 years, except for this one to the sharp left. It may look contemporary, but this is from 1983. Excellent example of contextualism. The curve of that building imitates the curve of the river. The blue and green reflective glass makes the whole neighborhood look good, and that's the point, that flattening of the context, contextualism. By the way, this is one of Chicagoans' favorite buildings because this is where Ferris Bueller's dad worked in that iconic Chicago documentary based on a true story. We're here at Wolf Point, is it? I think it is. We're here at Wolf Point. This is the junction of the 3 branches of the Chicago River. We've come down the main branch. We're turning now. We're going to go up the north branch just a little bit and then back the other way. Now, Wolf Point is the origin or the cradle of the town of Chicago. 1830s. This is where it all started, with a trading post and some taverns, all this construction, bringing life back to its origin. All right, see this curved office building with the parabolic slice out of the top and out of the bottom, the center block there as you go. Now, a couple years ago, a cute little boy looked up there and said, "Hey, that looks like Hot Pocket." You know what a Hot Pocket is? So, and recently somebody said, it does look like a Hot Pocket, but recently somebody said it looks more like a McDonald's cherry pie box. Should have a caution, filling hot. The next one, this peach-colored building right in front of us, Fulton House, the oldest we'll see on the river, was built in 1898. Here's its story. In the first half of the 1900s, Fulton House had no windows because it was a giant cold storage freezer building for the meat packing business. They would bring barges of beef from the cattle stockyards on the south side, freeze them in the giant freezer, and then offload them onto the refrigerated train cars right behind to be shipped across the country. 1970s, meat packing business goes away. They say it took about 3 months for this building to thaw out. And check it out, as they cut through those 3-foot thick walls to make the balconies and windows, they discovered the walls had been stuffed with matted horsehair and cork. That's what they used as insulation prior to styrofoam. They got it at Home Depot, apparently. Over to the right, the bridge. 1908 landmark bridge exposes how these Chicago-style bridges work. Think of a teeter-totter, a seesaw. That's how much of a concrete counterweight you need to balance this much steel. Over to the left, look at the interesting triangular-shaped river cottages. Harry Weiss, the architect, 1980s, 4 residential units. When he made these in 88, people thought he was kind of crazy, not just for the unique shape of the building, but for even having cottages on the north branch of the Chicago River, because the north branch was kind of the stinky, smelly industrial branch. Why would anyone want to live up here? But he helped Chicago change its attitude and its behavior towards the river. It's been cleaned up significantly since then. All right, here's what's going to happen. Our Captain Kimball is going to take us up here and do a U-turn, because we're going to head down the south branch. More fun stuff to see down there. I'm going to get off the mic, walk around, see if you got any questions. Good time for you, too. Chat among yourselves, maybe meet your neighbors, head downstairs, go see Ray at the credit card bar. Beer, wine, mixed drinks, water, anything you need, hot chocolate, hot coffee. We'll get started again in a couple of minutes. Just to put it in perspective, when I moved to Chicago in about 1993, at that time there might have been, I don't know, about a dozen people living in the Loop, in the business district downtown. Well, now there's probably 3,000 people living in the Loop. The downtown population of Chicago has grown dramatically over the last couple of decades. Now, this is a national phenomenon happening around the country. Maybe in your hometown, this urbanization of American cities is really the Europeanization of American cities. You know, Europeans often lived and worked in their city centers. Americans, we didn't, especially in the Midwest, because our downtowns were different. Our downtowns, first of all, were surrounded by factories and warehouses, so it was dirty downtown, it was isolated downtown, and there was just nothing fun to do. Well, think about it, all those things have changed. Those factories and warehouses are now condominiums. And it's cleaner, and there's tons of fun stuff to do downtown. So people are redoing their lifestyle calculations, choosing to maybe get rid of snowblowers and lawnmowers and minivans, and maybe the kids come downtown, use public transportation, be closer to work, have a better quality of life because you're not wasting time in traffic. Now, when people move down here, they want to work here as well, so corporations moving downtown as well. McDonald's, Walgreens, Motorola all moved world headquarters from suburbs into the city in the last few years. Okay, over to the right, back to contextualism. See these two curved buildings coming up on the right? Can you imagine they share the same radius? That is, the balconied residential building curves in at the same radius arc that the Hot Pocket office building curves out. Now what's interesting is they're not only copying each other. Look over here, they're both copying the radius on the curve of the New Veen building over there. Someone did away, there it is. It's Ferris Bueller's Dad's building. So here's three buildings, three curved buildings sharing one particular feature. This is an example of contextualism. It's kind of hiding in plain sight, making for a friendly skyline. Nerd alert. All right, guys, wake up. Here we go. See this Y-shaped building right in front of us? Looks like a bottle of wine upside down in the ground. It's called 150 North Riverside. It's a dress. It's about 5 years old. Now, because of the Y shape of the base of that building, the footprint of the building at ground level only occupies 20% of its lot space. So it's got an 1.5-acre plaza around the base of the building. Now, why is it built like a Y? There's a good explanation. It's because the back 2/3 of that lot are occupied by active Amtrak Metro train lines. They go underneath the plaza. That's what those round exhaust vents are for. On the riverside, so you can't build back there. On the riverside, the city requires a 30-foot setback from the river for public access. So you can't build there. So you're really hinged in this narrow parcel. To get the office space it needed, they built it out over a 39-foot wide base. So what you have is a very tall, very skinny, narrow-based office building in the windy city. You see the problem with that? Yes, these buildings are designed to sway in the wind. It's better to bend than break. The problem is that swing actually makes people nauseous. You get a little seasick, so you're going to try to stabilize them. How do you do that? Well, Chicago's pretty good at it. We're going to talk about 3 techniques to stabilize swaying buildings. The first technique, this building has what's called inertial slosh dampers. Here's what it is. Inside the top floor of the building, you can't see it, but there's 160,000 gallons of water in 12 tanks. Here's the way it works. Look at me for a second. When the building sways in one direction, the water in the tank simultaneously sloshes back the opposite way, correcting for that movement. The water absorbs the kinetic energy, dampens the oscillation, and brings the building to rest faster. It's like a big giant water shock absorber. Now, over to the left is the Bank of America building. We just finished it about a year and a half ago. It takes about 3 years. This one cost about $800 million for a skyscraper if you're in the market for one. Now, so remember we just said that the city requires this 30-foot setback from the river for public access. Look how this building dealt with it. They vaulted the 3rd floor with these giant tripod legs. Look at the size of those beams that are holding up the building from the outside. Now, this I find cool will too. Look, right here at eye level, see these wavy stainless steel panels. They're just decorative, but what those were the exterior panels from the old 1950s office building that they tore down here 5 years ago to build this building. They resurrected the old panels, cleaned them off, put them on there just to show continuity with what came before. Okay, over to the right, guys, we're stepping into what we call our time machine. And we say that because these 5 buildings coming up on the right were built chronologically. So we're going to march through time, we're going to decode these old buildings, and they are going to tell us what was going on. So a little 3-minute TED Talk, okay? The first building you'll see to the right, Art Deco. Remember that one? Streamlined verticality for the roaring 20s. Until the 20s stopped roaring. Remember your history, guys. What happened to the U.S. economy in 1929? The crash. The stock market crashed. The country goes into the Great Depression, followed by World War II. Guys, do you know that because of the Depression and the war, there was practically no demand for new office buildings around the country between about 1930 and about 1957. That's a whole generation. Look up there to the right. See the black box? When they reboot architecture in the late 50s, they reboot it all, and this is what they get. And it's called black box modernism. Now, the father of this genre of architecture was here in Chicago, and his name was Mies van der Rohe. You may not recognize him. He's probably the most influential architect of the 20th century. He was the guy that said less is more. Now, what they're going for late 50s, early 60s, they're going for more with less. They're going for this elegant simplicity of a classy black box. These buildings are machines to work in, very utilitarian. Now our question, remember, is why? So why were they building boxes in the 50s and 60s? Well, think about it. Because this generation who built these were Depression kids. They grew up in poverty, were naturally thrifty and conservative with their money. They didn't want to waste it on ornamentation. They didn't. And they were busy building the infrastructure of our country. They didn't have time or interest to sit around and argue about how many gargoyles there were in their office towers. They were just walking around. What do you need? An office building? You need it quick? You want it cheap? Well, let's see, now offices are square boxes. You put a bunch of them together, that's a big square box. Hey, look, here's a big square box. Take it wherever you want. Now, notice something. These modernist buildings never occupied their entire lawn space. They always have an extra large plaza around them. The plazas, that's where the people are. It's the plazas that give warmth and humanize these 50s and 60s, otherwise cold black buildings. The next one to the right, the white one, 1971. Still making boxes, a little bit softer, made with concrete or stone, called the International Style, generic universal building. You could have seen this anywhere in the country or the world in the 1970s, including your hometown. See the curved glass building, 1980s. Who remembers cultural shift, big hair band, shoulder pads, the world is changing. Needed new architecture. See the curved building, 1983. They were out of the box. No more square thinking. They wanted buildings that curve in the river curve. Buildings with reflective glass to teach society to get along in a changing world and context. Contextualism is born. So there's how it evolved. Let's review. From beautiful European cathedral-looking buildings in the early 20s to strike Art Deco in the optimistic late 20s to conservative black boxes and then white boxes and then contextual buildings, contemporary stuff these days, and that is the end of our TED Talk. Was that helpful? With that sense of evolution, kind of cool, isn't it? Yeah. Over to the right, you guys decide. Is this a bakery keeping a fitness center in business? Or is it a fitness center keeping a bakery in business? You can do both. You can do glutes and gluten. Carbs and cardio. Right next to each other. Over to the left. This building, I can tell you, was boring. Nobody used to talk about it. Until just a few years ago. The new owner spent $800,000 to to put themselves on the map and stick out a little. Literally, look up here. This is a giant, to scale, you are here map. That orange Lego brick sticking out is this building on the river. You can see we went up the north branch of the Chicago River from Wolf Point. We're coming down the south branch. You can see the grid pattern of streets overlaid on top there. So if you get lost, you can swim here, find your way home. Next building on the right, movie buffs. You may recognize this Art Deco building from the opening scene of the 2008 Batman movie, The Dark Knight. The Joker's guys slid down on a zip line to the roof of this building, went down and robbed Gotham Bank at the end of the scene. The Joker, Heath Ledger, drove a school bus full of cash out through those windows and escaped down Bay Aaron Street. And the Joker got away. It wasn't a bank that he robbed. It was a big empty post office, abandoned for years. Recently did a gut rehab to repurpose it into tech office. As you can see, these are right. And as promised, guys, we're going to shift gears now, and we are going to tell some stories. Everyone loves stories. We're going to tell 3 stories that'll help us understand Chicago and its good citizens. The first one is the story of the Great Chicago Fire. You may have heard they had a big fire with the cow and the lantern, and this is Catherine O'Leary. Now, to tell the story properly, we're going to separate the tragic facts from the rather comic fiction, and the facts are these. 1871, 151 years ago, October 8th, Sunday night, 9 p.m., a fire breaks out in Mrs. Catherine O'Leary's barn. A few blocks to your right, no one knows how. The problem was the wind. A 30-mile-an-hour storm wind, which creates this firestorm of horizontal flames that jump across the river twice. People running for their lives as the fire chased them. Wooden buildings falling like dominoes in flames behind them. The fire raged for 3 days, and by the time it was done, had burned down more than 17,000 buildings. That's a big number. Left more than 100,000 people, no home, no possessions. Killed 300 people, could have been much worse. And burn out 3.5 square miles of the city center. Those are the tragic facts. The fiction is a little more playful, comes in with, well then, how did the fire start? And in the end, nobody really knows. Okay, that's why there are myths and legends. We do know that it started in Mrs. Catherine O'Leary's barn. We know she was an Irish Catholic immigrant. We know she owned a cow. And we know that the city was angry. The city was looking to blame somebody, looking for a scapegoat. And of all people, they blamed her cow. Of all people, they said Mrs. Catherine O'Leary's cow intentionally, maliciously kicked over a kerosene lantern which started the fire. Now, personally, I don't think it's true. I've known Irish cows. They wouldn't do that on purpose. I think the cow was framed. I think it was a setup. I think the city just needed a scapegoat. Cow. She started. I think it was a cowspiracy. I think it's utterly unjust. Stay with me. That the city had a beef with Mrs. O'Leary. She pretty much had to hoof it out of town. This is what I heard. Now, holy cow, or cowabunga, I know there was a lot at stake, but I think it's time Chicago stopped milking this cheesy story, stop crying over spilled lanterns, and that's the end of the tale. Give it up, hashtag, the cow was framed. So 2% of people like cow jokes. Well, fire was the worst thing, and some people say the best thing to happen to Chicago. The first city of Chicago burned down. This is the second city. One of the reasons it gets the nickname the second city rose up out of the ashes of the old. Big urban fires attract architects who came from around the country to rebuild this city, which is why we're on an architectural boat tour. Now, these architects who came, they were smart. They had learned that wood apparently is flammable, so they started building buildings with steel frames. In fact, within half a generation, Chicago is the birthplace of the first 10-story steel-framed skyscraper. Then they were off to the races, and the sky was the limit. So there's our first story of destruction. There's the second story. 22 short years after the fire had destroyed the city, Chicago had rebuilt itself well enough to be able to host the World's Fair of 1893. That's a pretty good catch. Now, the guy they put in charge was important. A young architect named Daniel Burnham. Now, he is kind of the visionary, heroic architect of Chicago. He oversaw the design and build of the World's Fair facilities. It was down in Jackson Park by the lake. Imagine this campus that he built. 200 temporary buildings that looked as if Venice, Italy, or Athens, or Paris had been imported and painted white. This classic European-style beauty, this magical kingdom, this glowing utopia that was meant to inspire people with its beauty. Literally inspired. You see, because Daniel Burnham was part of a philosophy of architecture in the late 1800s called the City Beautiful movement. What do you guys think of this? They believed that beautiful cities, that beauty itself, has this inspiring, civilizing, dignifying effect on people. That beauty affects us, shapes culture, makes us better people. I absolutely think it's true. Lots of stuff debuted at the World's Fair, and a lot of people came. 27 million people came through the turnstiles of that fair during that 6 months. They came, they saw this beautiful white campus that Burnham made for them. Saw the first skyscraper. Saw this practically brand new city of Chicago. They go back to New York, London, Paris, Boston, impressed, and saying, oh my gosh, Chicago has indeed resurrected from that fire and is now a world-class city. So that fair was important because it put Chicago back on the map after the fire. It inspired the city. And I think more than anything gave Chicagoans a desire for more beauty. Here's what's happening. Our Captain Kimball is going to do another U-turn. This time we're going to head out towards the lake where, trust me, you're going to get your best photos out by the lake, and we're going to help each other take those photos. Here's the third story in this windy city. Third story. So Daniel Burnham grows up. He's a hero. He's a rock star. City leaders say, hey Daniel, you're wicked smart. Why don't you replan, reimagine, redraw the map of this industrial, chaotic city of Chicago in 1909? And he does. And he comes up with what we call the Daniel Burnham Plan for Chicago. Now this is arguably the first comprehensive urban city plan in the country, which means that Chicago has been doing urban city planning longer than others and is very good at it. True story, late last summer, this young guy gets off to Paris on the prairie. Here we are on the Midwest Plains, right? Paris on the prairie. Big boulevards, fountains, monuments, public art, big vistas. He wants Chicago to be a city in a garden. Not a garden in a city. That's a different priority. He wants every Chicago citizen to be within walking distance to a park. You know, there are 614 parks in the city of Chicago. 9% of the land is park space. Many of our 246 neighborhoods are named after the parks that they surround. I live in Humboldt Park on the north side. And our biggest park is called Lincoln Park, 1,200 acres. That's 1.5 times larger than New York's Central Park. Now, the plan shaped the face and the character of the city in so many ways. What was on it? Well, Grant Park itself and the museum campus, Navy Pier. You know, many Chicagoans might recognize Daniel Burnham's famous quotation. He said, "Make no small plans, because they have no magic to stir men's blood." Isn't that nice? We've got this magically beautiful city that inspires and stirs our blood because he dared to dream big dreams. So hopefully you can see these three stories go together. A fire destroyed, a fair animated, and a plan beautified. And it all goes back to an Irish cow that was framed. And they lived happily ever after. The end. Is that helpful? A little bit of history, understand where we came from? Sure. Hope that was helpful. Yeah, I understand the cow spent years in therapy dealing with the guilt, shame, and prison. Over to the right, do you remember the corn cob towers Same architect, same idea. Bertrand Goldberg strikes again. Another city within a city. Social scientist type architect. Okay, nerd alert. Later in the tour, we're going to talk about concrete. And you may find it interesting. I'm going to point out something now that we'll talk about later. See the building under construction. It's a residence, which means it's made entirely out of steel reinforced concrete. I want you to notice two things underneath the blue construction mesh. One, how relatively far apart those concrete columns are. And two, how relatively thin those concrete floor plates are. How do you get a thin concrete floor plate to stick out that far without cracking and breaking off? We're going to talk about that. The answer is a technology called post-tensioning. Meanwhile, we're going to talk about Chicago's royal family, the royal couple, the king and the queen. Can you see the king? I bet you can. Look straight ahead. Tall, dark, and handsome. Two big antennas. The Sears Willis Tower. There's the king. See the queen just this side of it, the octagonal-shaped building with the barrel crowns. Looks like a chess piece of a queen. Now, let's start there. When she debuted in 1990, those barrels were illuminated at night with 1,800 fluorescent tubes. They're mostly LED these days. But the point is, it was so bright, migrating birds thought it was the moon and got disoriented on their flight path. So they now turn those lights down in the bird migration season, spring and fall. And then the king, right behind it all, tall, dark, and handsome, the king of the hill, the star of the show, it's the Willis Tower. Unless you're from Chicago, and you might still be calling it the Sears Tower. Exactly. 1974, Sears department store, which was the Amazon of the day, built the tallest building in the world in the Windy City. You see the problem with that? Tall building, Windy City, the issue of sway. It's called drift. Did you know that the top floor of the Sears Willis Tower sways about 8 inches in each direction in a heavy wind? It's enough that people can feel it. It's enough that water sloshes around in a toilet. How did they deal with it? Here's our second of 3 techniques. It's as if they built 9 buildings and kind of grouped them together into a 3x3 grid at the base. Imagine that the Sears Willis Tower is made of 9 columns of differing heights. Each column is 75 feet by 75 feet square, and they are grouped or bundled together, which keeps the building from swaying too much. Only 2 of the 9 columns go all the way to 110 floors. The building is 1,451 feet tall. That's 442 meters, and you measure a tall building from the threshold of the door of the lowest open-air public entrance up to the top of the structure or spire. Those are antennae, not spire, not permanent. Don't count in the height of the building. Trump Tower and all the new buildings have spires. They're permanent, therefore they count, which is kind of silly because you can't go up on the spire. But I'm not bitter. Sears was the tallest building in the world for 24 years, which is a really long time to keep that title. Now, people ask, the current tallest building in the country is called One World Trade Center in New York City, which is the patriotic height of 1776. However, did you know the roof of our Sears Willis Tower is actually 83 feet taller than the roof of One World Trade Center? Their building is considered taller only because it's got a 408-foot spire sticking up on it. So that's kind of architecture too. Now the name. Sears department store left the building in the 1990s. That was pretty sad. It was a big employer here. And the Willis Insurance Brokerage Group from England has been leasing 3 floors and leasing the naming rights. So the official name of the building is the Willis Tower. Nothing personal against Willis. They're a fine company. They're good people. It's just that Chicagoans are stubborn and nostalgic. Maybe a little lazy. They still call it the Sears Tower. So you want to hear go to the Sears Tower is the Willis Tower. What is Willis Tower? There's a compromise. Okay? Some people say it's a Chicago pronunciation issue. The letters W-I-L-L-I-S is pronounced Sears. Willis is silent, keeping the door that quiet. Did you know that two people have successfully scaled the outside of the Sears Willis Tower, bottom to top, with no ropes and with no permission? The first one, an American climber named Dan Goodwin, did it. They call him Spider-Man because he was wearing a Spider-Man outfit, which is pretty cool. The second one to do it was a Frenchman named Alain Robert. They call him the French Spider-Man. He did it faster. Now, both of them made it successfully. Both of them were arrested successfully, which didn't stop Alain Robert. He went on to climb the tallest buildings in the world, including the current tallest building in the world, which is the Burj Khalifa. It's in Dubai. Now, besides being gloriously beautiful, my wife and I are saving to go visit there next year. Burj Khalifa, 2,717 feet tall, nearly twice as tall as our Sears Tower. Now, why do we talk about it here in Chicago? Because the lead architect of that tallest building in the world is Adrian Smith from Chicago, who built our Trump Tower. That's why we call him the world's tallest architect. And that's how Chicago keeps claim to tall buildings, by designing them. He's got another one under construction in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, going to be 3,300 feet tall. It's a kilometer tall. Up to the right, you can see the 5 glass boxes sticking out from the 103rd floor sky deck. And you'll see brave people and walk out onto an 1.5 inch glass and are looking down through their feet at you. And probably taking pictures. So there it is. Most Chicagoans would suggest Sears Willis Tower by day, Hancock Tower by night, but they're both pretty nice. Notice the antenna. This is kind of cool. The antenna, remember they don't count, but the antenna at the top of the Sears Willis Tower, 290 feet tall. Let's put it in perspective. That's the same height as this black box building right here. That's how big the antenna is. Imagine that building on top of that building. You know, Chicago, more than most big cities, Chicago has a lot of names and nicknames. The second city, you know, one of the reasons, because the first one burned down. The Windy City, 2 reasons for this one. One, the obvious, usually pretty windy, but also gets that name when Chicago was campaigning to host the World's Fair of 1893. Chicago sent its politicians and promoters to Congress to campaign. Couldn't stop bragging about Chicago. Congress would call them those windbag blowhards from that windbag city of Chicago. That's not that bad. I guess I'm a windbag. Also called Chi-Iria after a couple bad winters, got to -20 4 years ago. Chi-Town, the city on the lake, the Paris on the prairie, the city in a garden, the city of broad shoulders, the third coast, the city of neighborhoods, and from the song, Sweet Home Chicago. But the name Chicago comes from the Potawatomi Native American term describing the smell of the plants in this location. It was first being settled, Chicagoa, which means stinky onion. So New York is the Big Apple and Chicago's the Big Stinky Onion. Very proud of that. Also called the City That Works. Now, this moniker is playing on the idea that it's both a working class, gritty union, blue-collar town, which it definitely is. They say New York's all talk, LA's all show, and Chicago's all work. Just get it done. It's a city that works, a city that functions. Chicago's a big sports town. Pretty good public transportation system. It's easy to figure out. Give it a try. Use Google Maps. I think we have some of the friendliest bus drivers in the country. Excellent park district. Lots of Fortune 500 companies. Here's Boeing's world headquarters right there. We got McDonald's, Walgreens, Motorola, United Airlines, all headquartered here. Big foodie town. All kinds of celebrity chefs, fancy restaurants. You're not going to go hungry in Chicago. Now, Chicago is most, let's talk about food, most famous for our deep dish pizza, Chicago-style hot dogs, Italian beef sandwiches, and popcorn. The Chicago-style hot dog. Wherever you see a sign that says Vienna beef, you'll get a good Chicago all-beef hot dog. and you want yours with everything on it. Now they call that drug through the garden because it comes out with pickles, peppers, relish, tomatoes, onions, mustard, everything except ketchup. It's a Chicago thing. You just don't put ketchup on a Chicago hot dog. I think it's a misdemeanor crime. You get a night in jail or something like that. Throw you in the lake. Deep dish pizza. Everyone's got their fave. They're all very, very good. My wife and I like Blue Mountain Lines. They got a good sausage, pepperoni, butter crust. We had it for dinner the other night. There is a magical place called Portillo's. It's a 15-minute walk from where we get off the boat. They got really good Chicago-style hot dogs and Italian beef sandwiches. An Italian beef sandwich, thinly sliced roast beef, cooked in its own seasoned juice. You take a hunk of beef, you put it in a French roll. You take the French roll and you dunk it back into the juice. You put some giardiniera peppers on it. It's kind of sloppy and soggy, but it's wonderful. Very, very tasty. Garrett's popcorn. It's all around downtown. You get the Chicago mix. Be careful. It's addictive. Over to the right in the second row, you're going to see the purple Ernst & Young building. The purple building is a green building in the eco-friendly, low-carbon footprint, environmentally conscious sort of way. Literally has a green roof with plants watered by recycled drinking fountain water. Chicago wants to be the cleanest and greenest city in the country. Well on its way for that. The bridges. Yes, these bridges, Chicago-style bridges, open and close about 50 times a year. Half in the spring, half in the fall, on Wednesday and Saturday mornings for the sailboat flotillas as they head out to the lake in the spring and come back in the fall with their masts up. Now these bridges, they are like they're called double leaf. They open and close, imagine, in about a minute. They're so well balanced and calibrated, they can open and close in about a minute with less than 110 horsepower electric motor. That's half what you got in your car. Now this is kind of nerdy but cool, I think. These bridges, as you know, are made of steel, and that steel expands and contracts a little bit with temperature. That means the gap in the bridges is changing with temperature. The colder it is, the metal shrinks, the gap gets a little bigger. The hotter it is, the metal expands. What happens if it gets too hot? It could pinch, which happened a couple years ago. It was so hot one of the bridges has pinched itself shut. What did they do? Called in the fire department boats to come and spray down the bridge with water to cool it off enough so that it would shrink and then get it popped open and let the sailboats pass through. That's great. We're here again at Wolf Point again. We're here at Wolf Point again, 360 degrees of amazing. How are we doing, guys? You enjoying this? Yes. Okay, good. You guys are taking a little siesta there. How about this ginormous Art Deco building in front of us? This is it's called the Merchandise Mart. You know, in 1930, this was the largest building in the world. How big? 25 floors, 43 elevators, 96 acres of floor space. That's 73 football fields of office space. 7.5 miles of hallway. Had its own zip code, 2 city blocks. It's a big building. Now, this was a warehouse and showroom for Marshall Field Furniture. This isn't where you came to get a couch. This is where your department store came to get 5,000 couches and lamps and tables, wholesale. And they are lighting it up at night. This is something you can do each night for free. We all like that price. As we come under the bridge, over to the right, at eye level, against the wall of the Riverwalk where I'm pointing, you're going to see a dark glass box. Behind this dark glass is an $8 million, very sophisticated projector system. There it is, that every night, check the website for times, projects digital animated art across the river onto the entire front face of the Merchandise Mart. It's called Art on Mart, the largest permanent art display in the world, 2.5 acres. Check this out, look to the right. kind of nerdy. They programmed these 34 projectors to shine onto the entire facade of the building except for all of the windows. They calibrated with lasers to mask them not shining the windows and bother people that are working late, which I think is pretty cool. Over to the right, see these stainless steel posts at the base of which are these floating gardens. They're called fish hotels. The idea is the roots of these water plants grow down underneath there, creating a mini habitat so that some of the native species of fish can repopulate the river. 1970s, they say there was about 10 species of fish in the river. Now there's over 70, so the river's coming back to life. It's good for us. All right, guys, eyes up, cameras up. Just want to say this. We got a beautiful set of photo ops. Let your eyes soak in this beauty, okay? Let your soul soak it in. Next, we're coming under the LaSalle Street Bridge. Lots of movies filmed on LaSalle Street down there. Important North-South Street coming on loop in 1930. According to the Burnham Plan of 1909, they needed to widen LaSalle Street to turn it to a boulevard. The problem was this: red brick grocery warehouse building was in the way. Well, they couldn't move the building, so what they did was kind of clever and a little sneaky. They chopped off the leftmost section of this building, leaving it asymmetrical, imbalanced. Look carefully with me, you'll see. There are 5 bays of windows to the left of the clock tower, but count them, 6 bays of windows to the right of the clock tower. Now you can hardly tell it's lopsided because they cleaned up the brick facade on the left to mirror the other side and kind of cover up the crime, but now you know the truth. Kind of cool, huh? Look at all the folks enjoying the river walk. Okay, over to the right, guys. See this short, squat little building, number 55 on it? We call it, playfully, we call it the Danny DeVito building because it's, you know, short and angry between 2 supermodels. Now this is a short-lived architectural style from the late 1960s. You'll have seen this on campuses, government buildings, prisons, morally sturdy institutions. The name of the style? Brutalism. Rough exposed aggregate concrete, deep inset dark windows, heavy materials. It's like a fortress, and it is sort of hunkered and bunkered against a tumultuous time in U.S. history, the late 1960s. Brutalism. Now it does look brutal, but the name comes from the French term béton brut, which means raw concrete. So it's really just named for its surface. Oh, great time of day for this. Look straight ahead. See the green Art Deco building with the real 24-karat gold foil. It's the Carbide and Carbon building on Michigan Avenue. Many people's favorite buildings. It was built in 1929. That's when Chicago was pretty much just drinking its way through Prohibition. They built a big, giant protest bottle right in the middle of the city. I think it's very appropriate. And you can see it on the top. That makes you thirsty. Okay, guys, we're going to shift gears again, and this is the opinion section of the tour. My opinion, and I want you to form yours as well. Many people have commented to me over the years that Chicago has a way different feel than East Coast cities, different vibe than New York, Boston, Philly. Now, I love those cities, but there is this subtle, hard-to-name differences. And I've thought about this. I've got my little theories, right? I think it has something to do with our different use of space. Okay, here's my theory. Look at the space around these buildings, okay? I think that the buildings in Chicago generally have more breathing room space around them. And I think that personal space around the buildings in Chicago helps Chicago feel more relaxed and less intense than East Coast cities. You see the space right here. Now, here's some evidence to form your own opinion. Look at this. See these 4 buildings right in front of us? These are on top of each other. In fact, these are unique in Chicago because these are the only 4 tall towers on the river that abut each other. That is, they're built right up next to each other. I'd like you to watch these. Pay attention to how they make you feel. This is the East Coast way. In fact, allow yourself to feel the intensity of this congestion as you float past this. Now, East Coast city planning basically requires that they build like this because of extraordinary exorbitant land prices and conscious choices to sell and utilize every square inch of real estate. So this is what you get. Can you feel that East Coast high energy vibe? Okay? Just kind of crowded, congested. Now, compare that feeling to this. Look straight out here. See the space around these buildings. These buildings can breathe. You can breathe. See, I think this personal space around the buildings in Chicago makes this huge psychological and a cultural difference. Would you say Chicagoans themselves, maybe a little more laid back than East Coasters, their friends on the East Coast? I think that space has a calming effect on us. You know, architecture matters. Architecture is the use of space. That's what we're talking about. So form your own opinion. What do you think about it? Interesting, right? Over to the left, across the street from the white Wrigley building, you'll see the Chicago Tribune Tower. French Gothic Revival is the name of that style, modeled after a cathedral in Normandy, France. Now it's a landmark building. They're just finishing up a gut rehab, turning it from old newspaper offices into, surprise, surprise, high-end condos. What do you know of those? Remember we said in the early 1920s they were importing European-style cathedral beauty. The Wrigley building, modeled after a Spanish cathedral. The Trib Tower, modeled after a French cathedral. And about 5 years ago, into our neighborhood of cathedrals, we get a temple of technology, and it's the Apple Store. It's right there to your left. It's a glass box. You know, people are having trouble finding the building from the plaza, looking right through it. Now, the glass is structural, helping hold up that carbon fiber roof. See how the roof looks like an iPad or MacBook Air floating up there? Isn't that kind of clever? Okay, our next building. Over to the left is the Hancock Tower. Now, you'll only see it for a second in the gap between these two buildings. It's a half a mile to the north. And you'll notice it because it's kind of the iconic building in the skyline. It's the 5th tallest in the city. Let's see, I'll tell you what it is. It's a black trapezoid, wider at the bottom, narrower at the top. It's got the 2 big white antenna. Now, you'll see it for in just a second, a half mile to the north. Now, you can go up to their sky deck called 360. There it is, right there. You can see the 2 big white antenna, kind of the iconic building. You can go up to their 360 and get a good view, or you can go up to the 95th floor signature room and get a pricey cocktail. Equally good view. Okay, over to the right. You don't want to miss this one, guys. See the James Hardy black box? It's boring. We're not even going to talk about it. We're going to talk about the one behind it. In the second row, it's behind this building right now. You're going to see in a second a building with white horizontal curvy fins sticking out. Not the hourglass building. It's coming into view. You'll see a building with white horizontal curvy fins. The building is called Aqua Tower. It's a high-end residence and hotel. Each unit has its own unique balcony, which together makes the building look like waves of cascading water. Now, this was designed by a Chicago native architect named Jeannie Gang. She has her own architectural firm here in Chicago. She is a Chicagoland native, a Harvard graduate, and a genius. Literally a genius. She won the MacArthur Genius Grant. She's actually a genius. And she's been crushing it. She won the bid to redesign O'Hare Airport, $8.5 billion project. She beat out all the big names in architecture for that, and she's been busy. Look up here to your right, you'll see the hourglass-shaped blue building. This is hers. It's called the St. Regis high-end residence and hotel. They call it the Dr. Seuss building. See how it's swarming and dancing in and out right and left? Now, this is the 3rd tallest building in Chicago, but this is the tallest building in the world that's been designed by a female-led architecture firm. Jeannie Gang, very proud of her. All right, nerd alert. We are going to talk about concrete. And guys, you may find this interesting. Do you remember the residence we saw back there under construction that had the concrete columns that were really far apart and the really thin concrete floor plates? Well, think about it. If you have a high-end residence, you don't want to have a support column every 3 feet in your living room that'll block your views. You want the big spans, but that requires that the concrete floor plate has to stick out further between columns without cracking and breaking off. How do you get it to do that? cool technology called post-tensioning. I'm going to explain it using something you all know, Lego bricks. Yes, if you took a stack, a column of Lego blocks about a foot tall, grabbed it at the base, turned it sideways, horizontal, it'd pretty much fall apart. But if you took that column of Lego bricks, wrapped a couple big rubber bands around it, well, then you can grab it at the base, turn it horizontal, and pretty much use it as a bridge because it's compacted together to make it stiffer and stronger. Same thing in the concrete floor plates. Instead of big rubber bands in the middle of these concrete floor plates, they use these big steel cables about the diameter of your finger. And they run in a grid about every 12 inches in each direction from end to end. Now they make these cables really tight inside the floor plate. And what that's done is that's gathered and compressed that whole floor plate together, spring loaded with those cables, just like the rubber bands. Well, it ends up that concrete, just like Lego bricks, is stiffer and stronger under compression, so that it can now stick out further between columns, giving you bigger spans and better views. But what's more, because it's now stiffer and stronger, you can now take the floor plate, make it about 1/3 thinner. How about 8 inches of concrete instead of the normal 12 inches thick? Well, that's 1/3 the material cost savings, that's 1/3 the weight savings. Maybe you can make it taller. See the advantages of post-tensioning. Kind of cool, huh? Chicago, 2.7 million people in the city of Chicago. It's about 9.5 million in the metro area. Makes Chicago the third largest city in the country, behind New York and Los Angeles. Chicago is a city on the lake. You know, we have a 30-mile lakefront, 24 swimming beaches, 5,300 boat slips, 10 harbors, one of the biggest harbor systems in the world. Chicagoans jump in a lake in the summer. The water is fresh water, there's no sharks, no salt, nice white sandy beaches. We're crossing under them. Recently renamed Du Sable Lakeshore Drive Bridge, named after a guy named Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable, who's considered the father of Chicago. The first non-native settler here in the 1780s was an Afro-Caribbean Haitian fur trader. How does that work? So 11, Navy Pier was on the burn plan of 1909 as a municipal wharf. Now it's one of the biggest cultural attractions in the Midwest. When you go out there, I always recommend the Ferris wheel because you get amazing views. Now, speaking of good views, here's what's going to happen. Our Captain Kimball, because he's awesome, is going to take us out here and do a slow U-turn. What he does is he holds sideways for a little bit, which means you're going to have a nice little piece of some Chicago skyline. So if you were thinking about snapping that group or family photo, good time to do that. Yes, please just don't step on benches and chairs to take your photos. And if you are comfortable, we invite you to help each other with photos. Instead of watching every family of 7 children take a selfie, you take one of them and they'll take one of you and y'all can pay it forward. We call that our Chicago photo etiquette. Tell you what. Last call to go to the bathroom in the bar. We're going to be going into our dock in just a little bit. I want to get off the mic. We'll get started again in about a minute and a half. So stand up, stretch your legs, and come to me on to black views of folks behind you there. You guys want to take a seat? Here's a question. How many of you are enjoying the nerdy stuff? Raise your hands. Oh, we made some converts, didn't we? Let's do some more. Let's talk some more about drift. That's the fact that these big buildings sway in the wind. Look up here with me. See Jeannie Gang's big tall hourglass building. St. Regis. I can tell you, you don't want to be up in your multi-million-dollar condo throwing up at night because the wind is blowing and you're seasick. You need that thing stabilized, right? Now, how do you do it? Remember I mentioned there were 3 techniques. Well, we've only talked about 2 of them, but it ends up this building uses all 3 techniques. So let's review. The first one, it's got those inertial slush damper tanks. Inside the top skinny section up there, you'll see there's Big water tanks. Remember when the building sways in one direction, the water in the tank simultaneously sloshes back the opposite way to correct for that movement. The second technique, it's kind of like the Sears Willis Tower, but instead of bundling 9 columns into a square, this one does it with 4 that are lined up. You'll see the little short one and the 3 tall stagger ones that are lined up, supporting each other, giving the building strength in this axial direction, which is usually the wind direction. The third technique to stabilize is even cooler. You can see this. Look up to the top. About 15 floors from the top, you'll see what looks like 2 floors that have no windows. It's the 83rd and 84th floor of 101 floors, and it's called a blow-through floor. And just as it sounds, instead of windows and residences, it's left open so that the wind can literally blow through the building and relieve the pressure on the windward side of the building. Now it does work, it's very clever, except it's very expensive because it costs developers millions of dollars worth of real estate that they can't sell. You can't sell the 83rd and 84th floor because there's nothing up there. And just to keep it in perspective, somebody recently, just a few weeks ago, closed the deal buying the 71st and 72nd floor together for $20.5 million. So real estate's a little pricey up there. Here's last call to go to the bathroom, guys. We're coming into our dock in just a little bit. So I'm going to ask if you need the bathroom, now's the time. We need to get off the boat fairly quickly when we're done. Here's a fun fact for you. Do you know that TripAdvisor, they rank tours around the country and around the world? They do it based on a lot of stuff, including reviews. Now, you can write reviews on social media, know how. But anyway, TripAdvisor for 3 years ranked Shoreline Sightseeing. Guys, can I maybe take a seat in the back just to not block views of people behind you there? They ranked Shoreline Sightseeing Architecture River Tour. This tour that you chose to be the #1 tour experience in the country and the #2 tour experience in the world, right after the Vatican. Now, it got that way because this family-run business works really hard to meet your high standards of excellent service. I hope you feel like you've been well served today and that you got your money's worth. And that was one of our goals. Did you get your money's worth today? I hope so. Good. That was my game. I hope you guys did enjoy and were entertained. All right, here's what's happening, guys. We're coming into our dock. Last call to go to the bathroom, because otherwise I'm going to ask folks just to come back to our seats and to stay seated until we're all the way in and all the way tied up. And the reason is, in the very last second, the boat's going to tap against the wall and you're going to get bumped around a little bit. So you don't want to, for your safety, we ask you to stay seated, okay? Now here's what you can expect. As we get in there, we'll wait till our Captain Kimball gives us the okie dokie to get off the boat. When you get off the boat, you'll see some hungry trash cans. I'm going to lead you up the steps. When you get up there, you're going to see your boarding photos, which are very classy, professional photos with some really nice Chicago skylines. So take a look at those. Also, I'm going to be at the top of the stairs as you get off the boat up there. If you got anything else for me, be glad to receive any other questions that you might have. We always welcome your feedback, and certainly we appreciate your appreciation, but I don't know if you feel like you got more than your money's worth. But let's finish the tour the way we began, by talking one more time about beauty. Here's my final question for you. Did you see a beautiful city today? Okay, now remember, City Beautiful movement, Daniel Burton, late 1800s. They used to believe that beautiful cities, that beauty itself has this inspiring, civilizing, dignifying effect on people. That beauty affects us, shapes culture, makes us better people. Now I think it's true, and I hope that the beauty that you were exposed to today did indeed inspire you today. I don't know, maybe be that better person today. Maybe this that better world today. Maybe beauty is the way to achieve some of that. Beauty, this way to lift the city's soul. Something to think about. On behalf of Shoreline Sightseeing, our Captain Kimball, this wonderful crew, my name is Jim, and I want to welcome you again to the greatest city in the world, Sweet Home Chicago. Thanks for coming, everybody. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.